Hot off the presses is the Galaxy Note 8, Samsung's latest flagship phone, and it sports a dual camera system, which is a first for Samsung. The Galaxy S8, released in May, wasn't able to topple the LG G6, our current pick for smartphone camera dominance. And so we're interested to see the changes Samsung has made in the past 6 months. Can the new Note 8 emerge victorious where the S8 fell short? Keep watching to find out. Before we dig deeper into the results, let's review some specs. The Note 8 is the first Samsung phone to have a dual lens setup, with both cameras rocking 12 megapixel sensors. The main, or wide lens, has an aperture of f1.7, while the telephoto is a slower f2.4 lens. And in a first for any smartphone, both the main and telephoto lenses have optical image stabilization, or OIS. The G6, meanwhile, features a fairly typical main camera paired with a super wide lens. Both sensors are 13 megapixels, with the main shooter's aperture set at f1.8 and the wide at f2.4. Only the main camera has OIS built in, but you typically don't need stabilization with wider fields of view, though it would have been nice. But specs are only one slice of the pie. It really comes down to how each phone handles the post-processing of each photo. In the Shootout, I'm going to focus mostly on the results from the main cameras for both phones. They will be used the way most people do, straight out of the pocket, with the stock camera app and HDR set to auto. The testing categories will be broken into 4 sections: color, clarity, exposure, and user experience. And we hired the amazing model Sindel to help us capture some real-world scenarios here in San Francisco. And now on to the photos. The first category is color, and what I'm looking for here is how each phone handles white balance, saturation, and color reproduction. Now, if you've been following this Shootout series for a while, you might notice some similarities between the Note 8's and the S8's results. That's because the Note 8 struggles with white balance just like the S8 did earlier this year. It's not as bad this time around, but it still falls short compared to the G6, which captures a pleasing and natural color palette. The most extreme example shows up in this photo taken on a street corner. I can confirm that Sindel was not sick during our test, it's just the Note 8 having some problems. So while the G6 didn't score a huge win, LG still takes the color category. Next up is clarity, and what I'm studying here is the sharpness of each photo across the entire frame, as well as how sharp each camera stays in various lighting scenarios. In a brightly lit scene like this one, both cameras are nice and clear. There's a bit of ghosting towards the edge of the Note 8's frame, but it's nothing major. Against this brick wall, each camera performs great as well, but we start to notice that both have plenty of sharpening applied in post. So it's really a toss-up until we get into some super low light situations. The Note 8 performs admirably, but LG's superb OIS kicks in and helps the G6 pull ahead. The G6's image is noisier in most shots, but that allows it to retain a bit more detail, like this website here. It's worth noting that the S8 won this category in its camera showdown, but every scene presents a different lighting challenge, and this time, the LG G6 emerges victorious. The next test is exposure, and here we're looking over the dynamic range of each camera and how it chooses to expose for a scene. We'll get some help from our friendly neighborhood histogram, and here's the basic way to read it. All of the information on the right side of the histogram represents the bright areas of the image, while the left side represents the dark areas. Ideally, you want the exposure to fall somewhere in between, otherwise you start to lose information. Overall, the Note 8 tended to underexpose scenes compared to the G6. This is interesting because earlier this year the S8 was overexposing compared to the G6. Underexposure is a safer tactic, especially when dealing with high contrast scenarios, but it still didn't help the Note 8's chances. In almost every situation, I was able to pull more information out of the shadows and highlights from the G6. Now don't get me wrong, the Note 8 isn't way off the mark when it comes to exposure, it's just that the G6 nails it almost every time. The only place where the G6 continues to stumble is knowing when to use HDR. In this super high contrast environment, the G6 went between firing HDR and leaving it off, not ever really figuring it out. Despite that, the LG G6 still takes the exposure category. And now to our last category, which is user experience. Here we go over all of the other variables of using these phones to take photos. In terms of camera app speed, I've always been impressed with how quickly I can launch Samsung's default camera. The G6's stock app is starting to feel a bit sluggish, but I've been using this phone for months without a hard reset, so I won't ding it for that. As for features, I just love what LG has to offer in its stock camera app. From including a histogram in its manual mode, to its creative uses of its dual camera setup, the G6 is packed with extras, and makes Samsung's app feel like all bling and no substance. Some of Samsung's features are activated by a press, while others are activated by sliding out from the edge of the screen, while even more are buried in menus. It's not bad, it just feels like a phone experience instead of a camera experience, which is what you get on the G6. Samsung and LG also take different approaches when it comes to their second cameras. Samsung went with a telephoto lens, while LG stuck with its super wide-angle lens. I actually found plenty of uses for each style, the most notable being the live focus mode on the Note 8. This mode introduces bokeh or blur to a photo taken with the telephoto camera, and the results are impressive. On the other hand, I found myself needing the wide angle of the G6 more often in real-world scenarios. So this choice really boils down to personal preference. Both approaches are super useful, but I missed having LG's wide lens more than Samsung's telephoto. All in all, using the Note 8 is a great experience, and offers some advantages over the G6. But in the end, I continue to love using the LG G6, so that's who's taking the win in user experience. So now it's time to declare an overall winner. While Samsung has made some improvements to the Note 8 that help it top the S8, it's still not enough to take down the powerhouse that is the LG G6. LG's G6 features modest specs, but it really shows its strength in post-processing. Photos taken with the G6 feature natural and lifelike colors, and crisp and clear scenes, all while maintaining enough dynamic range so you can edit the photo later in Instagram. Pair that with LG's superb stock camera app and wide-angle second lens, and you have a phone that's yet to be beaten. And what a year the G6 has had so far. After taking down the Google Pixel, it went on to defeat the Samsung Galaxy S8, HTC's U11, and now Samsung's Galaxy Note 8. We already have a pre-production model of LG's V30 in for testing, so stay tuned for that showdown once the final version comes in. Let me know what you think of the results in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe so you can check out the next smartphone camera shootout.